Oh, really? That's a good year.
We're 6 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and call to order. We're going to call to order the regular meeting of the Los Olivos Community Services District, December 10 at 6 p.m. And we will start with a roll call.
Director Farron.
Here.
Director Parks. Here. Director Nelson. Here. Vice President Palmer.
Here.
President Kennedy.
Here. Get everybody stand. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Great, thanks everyone for coming out this evening. We'll start with public comments. So if anybody would like to address the board about anything else on the agenda, this is a great opportunity to do that. Do we have any takers in the room? Okay, yes, please.
Well, I'm not sure if now would be the time to just get one clarification on funding for the proposed pipeline and connection that is going that we talked about last time. Question or what's meeting and what's maybe going to be touching on?
So you can ask questions, and
Sure.
normally
Okay,
it's not a dialogue. Your opportunities to give us your insight, etc. But if you do have some questions answered, we'll see what we can do.
All right. So this is what
And I can talk to you anytime.
There you go.
The meeting I was in a few months ago, there was it appeared that there was more attendance. It appeared there was pressure about making a decision. We need to vote now. There was some concern about I'm a property owner. About 11 years now, and there was some concern about not being able to afford the cost of this proposed sewage and the connection. And the number was going around like 60,000. I'm not sure if that was correct, but that's what I sort of left that hearing. Then there was some voicing that the Los Olivos didn't have the funds as a comparison that Los Osos had funds X time ago. When they did it, there was some whatever these were, grants or whatnot. So my thought was, is there a push to get this thing going by X deadline? And if we don't do it by X deadline without any extra grants and funds, why the pressure that we didn't do it internally or as Los Osos itself? Or if we chose not to, then or decided we can't be able to doing it with limited funds that we have, or then the county takes it over, and then I just don't see the county doing it without getting some extra funds themselves. So wouldn't the advantage be to do everything we can, and we either do a wait and see, and if we do a wait and see, is there a problem with that? Because I sort of picture the county saying, okay, well, if there don't have any extra funds, we're not going to go forward with it because I don't see the county having deep pockets enough at this point. So that, I kind of left the meeting feeling like we the owners, property owners that would be absorbing this cost, we're being kind of not pushed. That wouldn't be the right word, but we were being asked to vote something, and there was some consternation about we don't have the monies for that. So, meaning there was a number of people saying that they didn't want to absorb that cost. So my thought was, if we delay, then if the flip side, the county takes it over. And the county would put that cost on us at some point, I imagine. But then the county then would probably wait till they had some other funds and other grants to be able to move forward. That's my thought. And I don't know if that's valid, but I left that meeting feeling that we were kind of being pushed in a corner of, hey, we need to vote now. We need to get this thing going by X deadline. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. I left feeling that.
Thank you. I would just encourage you, I know, General Manager Sam,
Sure.
his card, give him a call.
I will do that.
Can I have your name for the record?
Yeah, Fred Razo. I give you address.
Okay, no, that's all I need. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
Yeah, RAZO.
Well, thanks, I might give a plug to, the first and third Fridays.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, coffee with the director
Coffee
over
with the
left.
director over at Lefty's, the first and third Friday, and that's a good time where you probably get one-on-one time because they're not often frequently.
Or I can meet with you.
Then during the day at a particular time, I can do that.
It's usually around 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning on Fridays. first and third
First and third
Friday.
Fridays.
So next director, copy of the director will be next Friday, week from this Friday.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Catherine Rohr raised her hand.
Okay, Ms. Rohr, go ahead.
Hi, I was just going to respond to that really interesting public comment. And I would say as an initial matter, I appreciate the board's outreach efforts with the meet with a director one-on-one. But it really is weird and problematic that people are being provided information on an individual basis. The answer to how is the funding going to be handled is a question that should be answered for the entire community. That shouldn't be a one-on-one issue. And so that's weird. And that needs to be fixed. These aren't private conversations. These aren't individual issues. It's a community-wide matter, and there should be an answer that all of us can hear about what the plan and the strategy is for funding. Relatedly, I think that's a really interesting point about waiting because what we have seen is we don't have the catastrophic groundwater monitoring results everybody anticipated. And so the idea that there's a fire ablaze that needs to be put out immediately has certainly been disproven. And so I was actually thinking very much the same thing earlier today, which is this plan to connect to Solvang is so growth inducing, even though that's not your intention. That is going to be the effect when you run a pipeline into which all the properties can connect. And yes, it's possible. Please stop saying it's not. Once we do that, that's growth inducing. And what's going to ultimately happen is you then are going to be on the hook. You're going to need to grant permission to more people to tap into the pipeline in order to spread the cost among more users. That's going to be the incentive, right? So because it's going to get expensive to maintain that aging solving plant. So instead of doing that, if the county or the water board or whomever really thinks that this is such an important project, they can come in and they can develop a regional project. That's what they're supposed to do, is to do these region-wide projects. That's why they exist. And so they can come in and do it and pull together the funding and take that onus off of you so you're not imposing that burden on your neighbors. And turning what was supposed to be a local project into a regional project that becomes quite growth and sprawl inducing. So it's a really interesting idea, and I find it interesting that it's on more minds than just mine right now, but I think it's certainly worth a thought, worth pursuing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other hands up? Okay. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, the general manager's brief district status report.
Yeah, just real quick, the Wallace Group on the 30% design and Padre on environmental, those contracts are proceeding on schedule and on budget. I'll have more in my detailed report toward the end of the meeting, but that's the high level on that. I'd also add that if there's anybody in attendance or online or who listens to this later that hasn't done their septic survey yet, that data is still useful. In fact, we're finding a lot of use in that data. So if you haven't filled that out yet, please do. There's a link on the website to get to the form. If you don't want to fill out a form, you can print it out and mail it to us. There are lots of ways to get it to us. So very helpful data.
Great. Yeah. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I'm sorry, first we should we'll do public comment. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? In the room, anyone online? Any questions or discussion before, or would somebody like to make a motion? Comment that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. Next item on the agenda is the discussion regarding groundwater monitoring.
Yeah, if I may, Madam President. So you can read my kind of introduction to the agenda itself, but let me summarize. I did post a brief agenda addendum, actually prior to 72 hours, so it was well within the Brown Act and so on, that basically details my attempt to get funding. I did have a conversation with the county about whether or not they would be able to fund this. They do think they have some funds that they might be able to carve out to pay for the whole thing. So that may simplify the entire conversation, right? Since much of what we were talking about was, is there funding to make it happen that didn't come out of funds we would otherwise use to pursue a solution. I also, per the board's direction, spoke with the water board folks. They are very keen to see us continue twice a year, just because they too think, and I'll get to this in a second, but they also agreed with GSI, who is our water testing experts, that we don't have quite enough data points yet to kind of truly prove, what's happening. You have some data points, but is it really a trend or is it just a blip? So both of them kind of said, yeah, a couple more years would be very, very helpful to make sure we understand whether it's just, a short-term thing or those numbers stay consistent. So yeah, I think that's what the board directed, was talk to the water board, talk to the GSI, both said continue. And in addition to that, when they talked to the county, they said, yeah, there might be some funding. So up to your board, if you're saying to, just continue on then, can make that happen. Don't necessarily need a motion for that, just direction to staff. That's where your board decides to go. But before you get there, I'm sure you want to take public comment.
Yeah, we'll do public comment and we'll bring it back to the board. So any public comment in the room? Any hands up online? Okay. The comments.
Yeah, I appreciate they want us to continue doing it, and that they're going to get a lot out of it. They really need to pony up for some money to help us get it done. They're going to benefit too. I mean, I know the county is. What about the regional water board? Do they have any funding that they can help toss their way to be able to fund that sort of thing? It's not just us that's them.
Did EHS give any indication of timeline? Are we able, for example, will we be able to conduct this? Originally, we were scheduled to do tests in December.
November, actually.
Or sorry, that's right. Yeah. We postponed it. But did EHS indicate that they would be willing to pay if we had them at GSI come out in December?
Yes.
Okay.
But if the funding is there, I expect to hear this week from EHS with kind of, yes, there'll be funds to reimburse you for that. And speaking with GSI, they said they could do the testing as soon as next week. The only catch there is they've got to order from the testing company the samples, right? And everything. So it could happen. And it's good to get it, just to be clear, it's good to get it on a wet season, right? Kind of the more consistent of when you sample, that way you can really compare data over time. If you get into all summer or all winter or mix of the two, it can definitely.
A couple questions. So, of course, more is always better, but at what point would be good in either GSI or the water boards or somebody's opinion where we put a pin in it?
Yeah, GSI.
Well, I know, but just like, okay, we're going to commit to this, and then I say, ask the county board, instead of we go through this every year, like we should just be saying, all right, we're going to commit to whatever it is, 5 years, whatever it is. We're at year 3, we need 2 more years at $16,000 a year, and the water board and the county figure it out. And I don't know if part of your conversation with the water board is funding, or they're just the top. Anyway.
I didn't catch the last
sentence. I don't know. You didn't mention any conversation about budget or financial support from the water board. And I don't know if that was part of your discussion or the water board said talk to the county.
It's always been the latter. The water board says that kind of funding would come through the county.
So I appreciate EHS wanting to help. It just seems like it would be good to say, all right, we all agree this is the duration of the data set we're looking for. Figure out what it's going to cost from here on out and get them to commit to doing it. And we don't have to spend time. Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, I'm fine with doing another round if we get the funding from EHS. If or when that dries up, but I think we just have to come back and revisit this. It's just, I've heard from the regional board and others that, really we're looking at expecting a solution. And so then what are we, we have so much money to do certain things. So what is the point then?
Right.
If there's a solution that's up and running and there's a desire to track occasional monitoring to see how that's affecting things. I could see that too, but you know, I'd be happy with doing this test if county has the money, and we'll take up the next one at that point in time. Is my thought.
Yeah, I think as we have these ongoing discussions about funding with all the various stakeholders, this is one of those items that we can just tap on there because we know in kind of April, May timeframe, we're going to be needing to do it again. So we'll try to tee it up also. Is that enough direction for you, General Manager?
Is the general direction just that to continue so long as CHS says yes?
Yep.
That's what I'm hearing then.
Go for it. They've got the money. They can pay for it. Let's do it.
It's important to do. I mean, they're good numbers. It's good information to have, just going forward. So we can look at trend lines and stuff like that. So even if they try to push too hard, it's like, well, nothing's changing. Why are we pushing so hard if indeed it comes to something like that? But yeah, we need to progress what we're doing anyway and just kind of see, and hopefully as funding comes in, we'll get more information as it goes, but it'd still be nice to have those relatively consistent in the same seasons as we go, so we're not testing and then we don't have any comparison points.
Next item on the agenda are information lines, starting off with subcommittee reports. It was like Finance Committee did not meet. Parent Committee did not meet.
None of your subcommittees.
So no,
we did.
all right.
Doesn't mean we're not happening.
That's true. There's something there. So with the director comments, if anybody wants to give an update on some of the activities they've been working on, that would be perfect. All right, next item then is the general manager and district engineer comments.
Yeah, so district engineer Pike is at his annual work party with M&S, so he's not with us tonight, so it's just me. I would start by reminding the board that here we are in December. It seems like we just filled out our Form 700 yesterday, but we're back around to Form 700 time. So set your calendars for next month. I'll be pinging you hard. I just want to remind you that that's a process you guys go through every year to kind of, for those who aren't familiar, Form 700 board members, myself, have to declare financial interest to make sure we don't have any conflicting interest from a financial perspective. Form 700 is the way we do that. So the 25, 26 filings rapidly approaching. I'll then, I guess, just quickly move to my State of the District presentation last Wednesday. The video is posted, at least from my perspective, and I was a guy giving the presentation, so it was awesome, right? I thought it was a good meeting. Lots of good questions, great dialogue, roughly 20 total people, about 16 in the room, 4 or 5 online. I have noticed that there have been quite a few after the meeting watches of the video, because I can see that through YouTube, how many people have looked at it. 2 times as many people that were in the room. Now, I don't know if they watched the same thing or if it was one person watching, my opening 20 times. I don't know, right? You can't tell that much, but I'm bumping up my numbers, I've got 1 million followers. But I did think it was a good meeting. It is out there. I think I've heard from a few folks, for instance, you bump into people across the street and that sort of stuff. They, thought it was a good dialogue. I think the comment by one member of our community at the end of it was well spoken, and I knew exactly where he was coming from. He said, as we get closer to having some of these other meetings like Prop 218 and when you've made decisions about how to collect and all that sort of stuff, and we talk about funding some more, he felt that sort of a meeting, as opposed to a Brown Act bound meeting where people get to ask questions and maybe they'll get answers that maybe they won't, would be very helpful, just because the dialogue you get to have in a meeting like that. So at your board's direction, when the time is appropriate, I'm happy to host those, and we can work through, what that would look like. So anyhow, I think it was a good meeting, and I would invite anybody and everybody to watch the video. It's out there on YouTube. You can get to it from our webpage. I would then move to a meeting that we had, I feel like it was this week, it might have been last week, with the county, that a couple of you are in attendance, and maybe a report on it as well. We've been talking for quite some time, and I would suggest that maybe it was Director Fayram's kind of initial brainchild about getting what's known as a can and will serve from the county before there's some sort of change of use, particularly for commercial zone or currently residential and future commercial zone. We effectively have agreement. I'm working on a letter to the county to make sure that we truly understand what that means. But what that really means is, should, let's say the Grange, which we're sitting here in, wouldn't happen, so maybe this is a safe place to use an example. The Grange and the park get together and say, we're going to sell both of them and build a 4-story hotel. Well, that change of use would trigger to the district a can and will serve requirement. And the district wouldn't have planned for a 4-story hotel on these 2 lots. So therefore, we wouldn't have the capacity to serve that. And so that's the can and will process, serve process. The person who wants to make the change would, can you serve sewer capacity? And we have to respond effectively with a yes, we will, or no, we won't, or we will under these conditions, or some other thing. So I think that's all a great background for some of the other conversations that when I get to the agenda for next month or February, might be kind of in the mix of discussion at that time. Let me share real quick. This is my status report. It's in the agenda. So the audit is continuing. This is our annual audit we're required by law to do. Make that a little bigger so it's a little easier to read. MLH, Moss, Levy, Hartzheim is the firm that is doing our audits now. So that is continuing. I called it 30-30 designs, 30% design, 30-year cost of ownership design activities by Wallace Group. You can see the details of all of that. It's going quite well. We've been talking to ID1. ID1, of course, is the purveyor of all of our drinking water. And, to a certain extent, inflow from ID1 equals outflow into our sewers minus whatever goes onto the landscaping, right? So that's the reason we're trying to get some information from ID1. They're a good partner in what we're up to. I talked about the monitoring. This is the meeting I was talking about that we just had earlier this week or last week about the can and will serves. I'm now scheduled. I'm no longer working on getting a meeting in January. Be meeting with the county executive officer and her assistant executive officer just to talk through kind of here's where we're at, here's the near-term kinds of stuff, and here's the long-term stuff, right? Meaning what we're trying to accomplish, financial things we might need, such as enough money to get through the full design, and then there's this larger, more expensive thing being in construction out there, and how the county might be a partner in that with us. So we'll have an initial conversation, I'll call it, with the executive officer, just to get them up to speed, that sort of thing. I'm also working on obtaining TOT, which is transient occupancy tax or bed tax or whatever you want to call it, hotel tax, property tax, and sales tax data within the district, just so we understand from a funding to the county perspective, how much is our little area producing as compared to maybe some other unincorporated areas. Might be some way to leverage that information into encouraging the county to help us from a financial perspective. That's the thinking behind that. Working on setting up meetings with state elected officials. We've got one set up, I think, for next week with Single-Member Hart, and still talking about the one with Senator Lamont. So working on that. I did another presentation, basically used the State of the District presentation last Saturday to meet with the San Ynez Valley Concerned Citizens. I think that's what they call themselves. It might have been Concerned Citizens Coalition. Mostly, it appeared to me, I met with them over in Solvang. It seemed like a lot of Solvang residents who are concerned, like all of us, about, what does this pipeline look like? What's the impact down El Mutado? And I think from their perspective, at least a few of them were saying, what's the impact on my rates? And will you guys be paying what we're paying? And so I answered to the best of my ability those questions. When we met last month, I was talking about trying to get some paperwork filed at the state level. So keep in mind, when you talk about the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, Region 3, District 3, that's the folks that are based in San Luis Obispo. for the most part, they aren't the organization of the water board that gives us money, right? They're kind of an advocate for us, or they're not an advocate for us to the state level folks. And that's where water board money comes from. So working on that planning grant that we've been talking about to fund the rest of the design work. And one of the big hurdles was this thing I had to go through at the federal level to get something called a unique identity identifier, or UEI. Given that we don't have a physical address, that turned out to be quite an interesting activity. But I got finally, after a month of going around and around and around in circles and some help from your board, we got there. So the planning grant wasn't far enough along to attach, so I didn't attach it. So don't pay attention to see attached. And then next up, just want to note that we do have currently about $419,000 in our, I'll call it, checking account. Of course, property taxes, we're all paying them, right? They're due if you didn't turn it in today, they're late tomorrow, right? So make sure they get in by midnight tonight. Yeah, so we will see some revenue from that. And all of that goes into allowing us to pay for things like our environmental, pay for that phase one of the 30/30 design, and pay for general operations and other things that we're trying to accomplish. So let me see, I think that's probably it from that part of things. Let me jump back over here for just a second. We're going to talk in a minute or two here about what to put on the agenda. Now, I guess I can share this. It's in the agenda. But I do want to get some direction from your board. Both the January and February meetings are scheduled to be as quick as this one, unless we decide to do something of substance. So I offered some things that we might consider discussing. You know, we had a couple of conversations earlier this year about assessment approaches. I think given your board and the public some time to think through, well, what does that really mean? What might it look like? That would be a potential topic to talk about that. Dr. Fairham and some others have talked about different allocation methodologies as far as, you know, for instance, if we have zones of allocation, like if some part of the district were under effluent sewers and the other part under gravity fed, how would we do that? And so I could put together a little presentation for the board and public to talk about that. Another topic might be, you know, if we end up with effluent systems, you know, in some ways having that conversation, even though it might be viewed as premature, it might also be nice to have it when it's not emotional, right? Because there's nobody banging on your door saying, you know, I want this or I don't want this. So might be a time to talk through some of the implications of what that could mean. Another good topic we should get to at some point is this conversation about when to hold the Prop 218. We've been pushing toward something around this time next year. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm going to suggest we probably won't do it at this time next year, for the simple fact that we could have a new board member or two, right? They're going to get elected there's 3 of you up for election in November, not seated if you're a new board member until January. So you've got that kind of weird in-between period that you might want to at least wait till the new board is seated in January of 27. A month's delay through the holidays, I don't know if that's going to cost you that much, but something to think about. The other thing to think about, and something we can talk more about as far as Prop 218 is concerned, is, you know, the further away from actual construction you get, the more interesting that gets from a financing perspective. This was one of the questions at the State of the District the other day. And it does turn into an interesting sort of a dance between how much can you get for grants and how much do you want to take out in loans or bonds or whatever. And it gets particularly difficult when, you know, if you do a 218, let me just say January 1 of 2027, and you don't plan on starting construction until January 1 of 2029, well, that 2-year gap, kind of hard to guarantee that you're going to get a grant, right? And yet when you go, for instance, to a bond holder, if you're trying to get bonds for this thing, they're going to say, well, are you getting grants? And if so, who are they from? How much are they in? And all that sort of thing. So I can describe that in more detail next month, if that's what your board's pleasure is, just to suggest some ways around that. It is kind of an interesting back and forth, though, between grant funding and let's just call it loans of some sort. and how those two play together so that you get a solid picture. And I know that some board members have some strong opinions and thoughts on that, and I think it'd be good to have that conversation at some point. And then the last thing is kind of related, at least on my list here, is just, we were just talking about Ken and Will served letters a minute ago. A topic for next month might be to talk through what is often referred to as biparcel allocation. And what I mean by that is, allocating in a typical month, and I'm making this number up because I don't know what the exact number is, 700 gallons per month for a residential parcel might be a reasonable number, whereas 1,500 gallons for a wine tasting place is a reasonable number, and 14,000 gallons might be a reasonable number for Maddie's, right? Because that's what they're capped at today. But allocating that capacity by parcel such that it will help us both build what is needed and nothing more. But then there's a process that we'd have to implement to do that, right? We would have to track what's the allocation for a given parcel. And we don't have so many parcels that would be particularly difficult to do. But again, I think it might be a good thing. I could put together a brief presentation if that were your board's desire to kind of walk through some of those details and help you and the public sort of think through, well, what could that look like? And, if I've got a parcel that's commercially zoned today that has a single family home on it, and I know I want to do something with it, don't allocate me 700 gallons, right? Somebody might say, no, I want a commercial allocation. And how do we go through that process? So might, again, be a good topic for us, and certainly would be helpful to the Wallace Group and as we begin to work on contracts with the city of Solvang and pursue that path. So those could be topics for January and or February or whatever your board has, because if we don't come up with a couple, we'll just be talking about approving invoices and going on.
And wouldn't that help with assessment as well? Just the way it's all allocated?
Yes, the allocation, yes. Thank you, Director Parks. The allocation amount.
Information is because assessment's going to come up and it's going to be contentious no matter what. But, it would.
Correct. It'll help influence how we assess, right? Because it does kind of reflect a level of benefit, right? For sure.
Well, it might benefit having council hear that, and you might be able to get do some work on that and come back to us on how all of those are governed as well.
Yeah, I think just at the meeting that we had with the county, Joan, I'm sorry, I can't remember who said they would do this. I want to say it was Mars from Oracle. Was going to look at, he thought there was a community who had done something similar to what we're talking about, and there might be sort of a starting point for us to consider. But I don't, but we didn't reach that, we didn't get back to it. I'm pretty sure it was
EHS,
yeah. Or sorry, EHS, thank you. I thought, I'm pretty sure he thought there was he knew a community that had done something similar to what we're talking about. And that could be a good starting point for us.
I think that was the biggest jurisdiction.
Could have been, yeah. But yeah, that would be great if he might have something for us.
And then we might want to have a discussion on the 218 and the whens. I mean, we have a final design that we have to do, and do we want to do that before the design's finished? Do we want to do that before we have a grant? I think it'd be good for the board to weigh in on on that aspect too. So I think these are good topics that Mr. Savage brought up, of course.
Yeah, I agree. And your comment about the Wallace Group and what, again, what work can we be doing to make sure we're not slowing them down even beyond the 30%? In other words, if we get to 30%, we make a decision how we're going to move to that next level of design, assuming we get money to do so. What other groundwork should we be laying down? So, we're using January, February for meaningful work. Reactive. You'd also sent out that EPA.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't know if that was an additional agenda item or if that goes under.
If I may, thank you. So I have some copies of this. It's on the website as well. I know that Director Parks and President Kennedy had met with representatives of this program. I've met, they sent me a message, I think it was last week, and I met with them yesterday. So the EPA has a program entitled Closing America's Wastewater Access Gap Initiative, and they put together a brief scope for us. It appears that it's a free program that they can kind of make sure that they helped us consider, different alternatives. They can help us with communications. They can just kind of, look at what we've been up to and make sure that we haven't missed something, essentially. They can do things like help us with some funding applications, look at alternatives, that sort of stuff. My plan at this point is just to continue working with them. If they get to a point where they say, oh, no, we need an MOU or money or anything like that, well, then I'll come back to your board with that. Another thought might be to engage with one of the subcommittees and have them work with me on this. Given the kinds of things we're talking about, I'm not sure which one would be best. Maybe technical, maybe project management, because they're kind of all over the map, right? It does seem like a reasonable thing to at least make sure we've, taken advantage of. Like I said, from when I heard about it a week before last till yesterday, it was a pretty quick turnaround to actually set up the meeting. I met with them early in the morning because they're all on the East Coast. So, as you guys all know, I'm an early riser, so we met early in the morning and worked for everybody. That's what that was about. If you didn't see the handout, there's some here. Somebody wants to take a look at it. It's just something else. I don't intend to spend a whole lot of time with them if I don't have to. It sounds like we can kind of just help guide them in certain areas, and they'll kind of run off and do stuff. They understand that we have limited resources, both from a people time as well as funding. If there's a subcommittee that, as you've read through it, makes sense, I'd love to know which one, because I think it would be helpful for some other eyes and ears to be on it rather than just mine. So.
All right, so do you have enough direction for January?
No.
Okay. All right, let's decide.
Maybe some specific suggestions. I'm not, unless you want me to just agendize all these things. And
is there a flighting that makes sense? In other words, keeping up.
The assessment and 218 are linked.
And
So maybe those two.
And I also think it's helpful to revisit. I was going to make this in my director comments, but looking at our project timeline to those critical milestone points, if you can include that in the monthly agenda or a link to it, so we always are looking at that frame of reference for making sure we're on track for those critical decision points. So I would say to that I think working on the assessment, the allocation, the Prop 218, how do we need to prioritize those for January versus February in terms of meeting those? I don't know if
so maybe I can take it the other way around. Is your board interested in talking about ownership of effluent at this point, or should we push that out? Effluent systems, if we have them, you want to push that one out?
Push it out until we have the apples to apples is my vote.
Up to your board. So assessment, Prop 218, the by parcel allocation, that sounds like a reasonable one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I can work with that, and I'll work with you, President County, and we'll.
Yes, I think we're going to, especially on the assessment allocation, we're going to probably end up needing a workshop to get community input. Getting Brown Act. So would take good feedback from the community. So that would be that's my first opinion.
Also in January or February, depending on where we are, is that chicken or the egg on getting some clarity around when we can get funding commitments. What funding commitments can we get before a vote? What funding commitments have to wait until after a vote? Because I'm still not clear on, we can't fund a project until you approved it. Well, we're not going to get it approved until we get funding. So, but are there options we can have ahead of time prior to a 218 vote. Maybe it's like pre-218, post-218, because I think we need clarity and the community needs clarity in order to make an informed decision.
I think that would come out in conversation, Director Bain wants to talk about was when to hold a 218. That's all part of that conversation about what you can have and what you can't have, and when you have it, when you won't. That's right.
But we've had a lot of that specific portion of that.
Okay. Like I said, I could probably put together a presentation that helped you and the public both during that meeting and in the future, and be something to refer back to. So, okay, now I understand how this all fits together. Okay, great.
Maybe the EPA could help as well. I mean,
I'm sorry?
maybe the EPA group could help as well. I mean, as far as they've been there.
They don't know 218.
Okay.
That's a California specific process, and they're federal. So RGS certainly does, but then that's the group we hired for communications, and that's one of the reasons we hired them, because they know 218's in the process. All right, I think I have enough now.
Okay, good. All right. Well, anything else from the board for general manager on this item?
Just on one other thing, we were talking about the capital construction costs. Also, how are we going to get the $1 million to finish the design? So again, that's rolled into that, but a separate focus on what our options are and timing for that. Thanks.
Okay, if there nothing else, we'll move on to director comments. Hold on along.
I just wanted to follow up on the state of the district. I listened, thank you guys for taking the time to do that. I got a lot of good feedback from residents. I do agree that increased frequency once have visibility on the 218. Even if quarterly or as needed, those are productive ways to share information and have meaningful discussion in a meeting setting. So thank you.
Good.
Well, I just want to say, well, this is our last meeting of the year, so I want to wish everybody happy holidays, of course. And I just wanted to say that, we have a lot of diverse viewpoints, and whether you're friend or foe, I have the same wish of happy holidays. Also, I think I said this last month to everyone, if you have concerns, work with us. And I think we finally have a lot in common, actually. And some of the approaches, I don't know they're helpful. And with concerns, I think we all share. Work with us, and maybe we can get this worked out. For that, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
I have nothing further to add other than we'll just say that the meeting that we had with Water Quality Board in mid-November was also really productive. The board has been really consistent as we're meeting with these stakeholders that funding and growth management are essential if we're going to have any level. We're going to have success at this. Those two key things are absolutely key. So again, 2 excellent meetings. Just as a follow-up on the water meeting, there was a woman in the meeting whose name I don't remember, but she said that she would take a look at the disadvantaged community component for just the district, because right now we know the 93411 is a no-go.
Right, so District Union Pike provided me with a shape file, which is a file that is created for a GIS system, graphical information system. I sent that to the gentleman at the state who will do that for us. I haven't heard back from him yet.
Okay, good. Yeah, that would be, the level is quite high, and there's a good chance that our district boundary, we could have a shot. And that would certainly help us work. Okay, thank you very much for following up with that. Appreciate it. And I have nothing further, so if that's it, we get a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment at 6:44.
Second.
First and a second.
Who was the second?
Tom. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
You did it by 2 minutes. Well done.
I kept talking
can't
about
be
it.
done.
Thank you everyone for coming out.
Bye,
today.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you next year.